This seat is for my mother-in-law, not you." Sarah's words, my own daughter's words, echoed through the dining room like a gunshot, silencing the cheerful chatter of Christmas Eve dinner. That December 24th, which should have been one of the happiest days of my life, turned into my worst nightmare. At 68 years old, my heart already scarred by so many battles, I never imagined that the deepest pain would come from the mouth of my only child. The table was set with the usual care. A linen tablecloth, porcelain dishes I inherited from my mother, twinkling candles, and the comforting aroma of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. Our house in the suburbs of Springfield, Illinois, was filled with lights and laughter. Relatives and friends, some I hadn't seen in years, gathered to celebrate. Sarah, my beautiful Sarah, 35 years old, was radiant in her red dress, next to her husband, David, and his mother, Mrs. Peterson, a woman I barely knew. I had spent the entire week preparing everything, from the decorations to every dish for dinner, to make it a perfect night for my family. When I sat in my usual spot, at the head of the table, from where I could observe all my loved ones, Sarah approached with a cold expression. "Mom, Mrs. Peterson is going to sit here. It's the seat of honor. This seat is for my mother-in-law, not you." She pointed to the empty chair next to David, where I was supposed to be. The smile on my face froze. I felt my blood run cold. I tried to argue. "But honey, I always sit here." Before I could finish, she interrupted me. "It doesn't matter, Mom. Today is Christmas, and the seat of honor is for my husband's mother. Please get up." The laughter and conversation ceased. All eyes turned to me. I felt my face burn with shame. My legs trembled, and before I could compose myself, I tripped on the hem of my dress and fell to the floor, in front of the entire family. Hot tears streamed down my face, not just from the physical pain of the fall, but from the overwhelming humiliation. No one moved to help me immediately. David, my son-in-law, just looked at the floor. Mrs. Peterson made a discomforted expression, but said nothing. It was my nephew, little Billy, just 8 years old, who ran to help me up. At that moment, as I felt the pain of the fall and the sting of betrayal, a chilling certainty settled in my heart. That night would not end without me doing something terrible. If you've ever felt the pain of being humiliated by those you love most, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow this story of a comeback. Back in my small apartment, the silence was deafening, broken only by my muffled sobs. The image of my daughter, Sarah, dismissing me in front of everyone, hammered in my mind. The pain of the physical fall was insignificant compared to the wound opened in my soul. I, Mia, who had dedicated every fiber of my being to raising her alone, after her father left us when she was only 5 years old. I remember the sleepless nights. Working 2 jobs, by day as a secretary in a law firm in downtown Chicago, and by night cleaning a restaurant. I would come home exhausted, but always found the strength to read a story to Sarah, to help her with her homework, to ensure she never felt the absence of a father. I sacrificed my own dreams, my relationships, my youth, so that she would have everything. Ballet classes, study trips, the best law school in the state, all paid for with the sweat of my labor and countless hours of overtime. She was my pride, my reason for living, the jewel in my crown. But over the years, especially after she met David in college, Sarah began to change. David came from a wealthy family in Connecticut, and his mother, Mrs. Peterson, was a socialite, accustomed to luxuries and privileges. Sarah, who had always been simple and down-to-earth, began to be dazzled by that world. I tried to get closer to Mrs. Peterson, but she was always distant, with an air of superiority that made me feel small. Sarah, in turn, began to see me as an embarrassment, a reminder of the humble past she wanted to leave behind. My advice was ignored, my Sunday lunches canceled, my opinions devalued. The humiliation of that Christmas Eve was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of veiled disrespect. As I wiped away my tears and tried to soothe the pain in my knee, a cold rage began to simmer within me. How could she? How could the daughter I raised with so much love treat me with such cruelty? The feeling of being discarded, of being belittled, was unbearable. At that moment, the naive and sacrificing Mia died. In her place, a woman with cold determination and a thirst for justice was born. I would do something that would change Sarah's life forever. Not out of petty revenge, but so that she would understand the true value of the love and sacrifice I had made for her. The night dragged on in silent torture. The clock on the kitchen wall struck 3 a.m., but sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every tick-tock was a reminder of the humiliation I had suffered. I got up from the armchair where I had been huddled, my knee throbbing, and walked to the window. The street was covered in a thin layer of snow, and the Christmas lights of the neighboring houses glowed, mocking my pain. I had spent my entire life putting Sarah first, giving up everything to ensure her future. Now it was my turn. The terrible thing I would do would not be an act of violence or malice, but a cold, calculated decision that would hit her where it hurt most, in her stability and comfort, those that I myself had built for her. I remembered the apartment I bought for her in an upscale neighborhood of Los Angeles, where she lived with David. A graduation gift, paid in full with my life savings. I remembered the investment fund I had created in her name to guarantee her financial security, and the life insurance I maintained, where she was the sole beneficiary. All of this, built with love and sacrifice, would now be the instrument of my justice. I picked up my landline phone. I had left my cell phone on silent, ignoring the few concerned messages I received from distant relatives after the incident. I dialed the number of my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a trusted man who had been with me for years. It was late, but I knew he would understand the urgency. Mr. Henderson, I began, my voice firm despite the internal tremor. I need you to come to my apartment tomorrow morning, as early as possible. I have some urgent changes to make to my will and other financial documents. He, with his usual discretion, simply replied, I'll be there. Mrs. Mia, at 8 sharp. That night, as the snow fell outside, I made a mental list of every step I would take. The apartment, the investment fund, the life insurance, everything would be reevaluated. Sarah had chosen her path, and I, her mother, would ensure she walked it on her own 2 feet, without the safety net I had woven for decades. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by a strange sense of power. The lesson Sarah would learn would be harsh, but necessary, and I, her mother, would be the teacher. Christmas morning had barely dawned over the snow-covered rooftops of Springfield, Illinois, when the doorbell rang promptly at 8 a.m. Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, was there, impeccable in his gray suit, with his leather briefcase. His blue eyes, usually serene, held a hint of curiosity as he saw me. I, Mia, at 68, still had a sore knee, but my mind was clearer than ever. I offered him coffee, which he accepted with a nod. Mrs. Mia, you sounded quite determined on the phone last night, he began, as I handed him a steaming cup. Yes, Mr. Henderson, and I still am. I need your help to make some significant changes to my legal documents. I sat at the kitchen table, where Sarah had so often had her breakfast before school, and began to state my intentions. First, I want to change the beneficiary of my life insurance. Sarah will no longer be the sole one. I want my nephew, Billy, and the Hope for Homeless Youth charity to receive equal shares. Mr. Henderson took notes, without batting an eye. Secondly, the apartment in Los Angeles, the one I gave to Sarah as a gift. I want to reverse the donation. I know there's a clause that allows this in cases of blatant ingratitude or family breakdown. Yesterday's public humiliation, in front of the entire family, I believe fits perfectly. He raised an eyebrow, but nodded. It's a drastic measure, Mrs. Mia, but legally possible, considering the circumstances and the documentation you possess. And finally, the investment fund I created for her. I want to freeze it and reevaluate the allocation of funds. I don't want Sarah to have access to it for now. Mr. Henderson capped his pen and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Mia, are you aware that these actions will have a profound financial and emotional impact on your daughter? I am, Mr. Henderson, and I am aware that she publicly humiliated me and discarded me as if I were a burden. She made her choice. Now, I make mine. His voice was professional, but I could sense a hint of admiration in his gaze. Very well, Mrs. Mia. I will begin the procedures immediately. The apartment reversal notification will be delivered today. As for the insurance and the fund, it will take a few hours to formalize. At that moment, as Mr. Henderson bid farewell, I felt a strange relief. The pain of humiliation was still present, but the feeling of regaining control of my life was a balm. Sarah had taught me a lesson about ingratitude, and I was about to teach her a lesson about consequences. While I, Mia, made my cold and calculated decisions, Sarah, my daughter, woke up in her king-size bed in the luxurious Los Angeles apartment. The champagne hangover from the night before was light, but the memory of the scene her mother had made at Christmas dinner deeply irritated her. How could she embarrass me like that? She thought, rolling her eyes. Always so dramatic. She got up, put on her silk robe, and went to the kitchen, where David was already making coffee. Good morning, darling. Your mother really overreacted yesterday, didn't she? He said, kissing her forehead. Sarah nodded, picking up her phone to check social media. That's when she noticed something strange. A bank notification. Transaction declined. She tried again, buying coffee online. Declined. That's odd, she muttered. My credit card must have a problem. Minutes later, David's phone rang. It was Mrs. Peterson, his mother, her voice agitated. David, what's going on? Your apartment. I received a legal notification. It seems Mia is reversing the donation. Sarah heard the words and felt her blood run cold. What? That's impossible! That apartment is mine. She grabbed David's phone and called the real estate agency that managed the building. The attendant confirmed in a formal tone, Mrs. Santos, we have received a legal notification of property reversal. Ms. Mia Santos is reclaiming possession of the property. You have 24 hours to vacate. Sarah's world began to spin. She tried to call me, but my phone was on silent. She called my landline, but no one answered. Panic began to set in. She tried to access her banking app to check her accounts, but access was blocked. Mia, what are you doing? She yelled into the phone as if I could hear her. David, who had been calm until then, started to get nervous. Sarah, what does this mean? Reversing the donation? Freezing accounts? Has your mother gone crazy? Hours passed, and Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. They were calls from relatives, curious friends, even some colleagues, all confused by the news that was starting to circulate. Your mother is selling the investment fund she had in your name, asked a friend. What's going on, Sarah? I heard your life insurance was changed, said another. With each call, the reality became crueler. She looked at her phone screen, which now showed 59 missed calls. All from David, from Mrs. Peterson, from friends, but none from me. Despair began to take over. The comfortable life I had built for her was crumbling, brick by brick, and she could do nothing. The apartment, once a haven of luxury and security, now seemed like a crumbling sandcastle. Sarah, 35, was in shock, sitting on the designer sofa, phone in hand, the 59 missed calls flashing on the screen like a sinister warning. David, her husband, was furious. How could your mother do this? She can't just take the apartment from us. And the money? Where is all the money? I don't know, David. She's not answering. She blocked everything, Sarah replied, her voice choked with tears. Mrs. Peterson, who had arrived at the apartment as soon as she heard the news, watched the scene with an expression of disdain. I always said that woman was trouble, David. I always knew she wasn't good for our family. But the apartment is mine. It was a gift. Sarah tried to argue, but Mrs. Peterson cut her off. Gifts can be revoked, dear, especially when ingratitude is so evident. Your mother has every legal right to do this. The coldness of her mother-in-law, which Sarah once admired as strength, now seemed cruel. The official eviction notice landed in her hands, a cold and impersonal document demanding the property be vacated within 24 hours. The investment fund, which she considered a guarantee for the future, had been frozen. The life insurance, which would protect her in case of any eventuality, had been altered. The life she knew, built on the solid foundation of my love and sacrifice, had been ripped out from under her feet. David, what are we going to do? Sarah asked, tears streaming. We have nowhere to go. My cards are blocked. I can't access my accounts. David, who had seemed so confident and successful before, was now pale and desperate. I don't know, Sarah. My apartment in Connecticut is rented out, and Mrs. Peterson doesn't have room for us. The raw truth began to reveal itself. David was not the safe harbor she imagined. He also depended, in large part, on the financial comfort I provided. At that moment, Sarah realized the extent of my revenge. It wasn't just the material loss, but the exposure of the fragility of her own life, her dependence on me, the illusion of independence that David had built. She had traded the unconditional love of her mother for the empty promise of a man who was now abandoning her to her fate. The pain of the humiliation at Christmas dinner seemed small compared to the pain of the reality unfolding before her. The eviction notice, cold and relentless, became a reality. Sarah and David were forced to leave the luxurious apartment in Los Angeles. Without access to bank accounts, with blocked cards, and without the investment fund that Sarah considered hers by right, reality hit them with brutal force. David, who once exuded confident charm, proved to be a fragile and selfish man. Your mother is crazy. How could she do this to us? He yelled, blaming her for every setback. Mrs. Peterson, his mother, refused to shelter them, claiming she couldn't get involved in such unpleasant family dramas. Sarah, 35, watched her world crumble. The glamour, the security, the image of success she so cultivated, all vanished in a matter of days. They found themselves without a roof over their heads, without money, and without the support David had promised. The only option was to find a cheap motel on the outskirts of Los Angeles, paying with the little cash David still had. The nights were long and filled with arguments. David blamed her for having angered her mother, for not having kept the golden goose happy. Sarah, in turn, began to see the true face of the man for whom she had abandoned her mother. He didn't love her. He loved the comfort that I, Mia, provided. Sarah's cell phone, once a status symbol, was now a source of anguish. The 59 missed calls from the day before had multiplied. They were creditors, curious friends, and even some colleagues who had heard the rumors. The humiliation she had inflicted on me at Christmas dinner seemed small compared to the shame she felt now. She tried to call me repeatedly, but my number was blocked. She left desperate voicemails, pleading for help, for an explanation, for any sign that I still cared. Mom, please answer. I have nowhere to go! David abandoned me. I made a mistake, Mom. I made a huge mistake. But I, Mia, at 68, stood firm. Sarah's words, once so cruel, were now a distant echo. I knew she needed to feel the weight of her choices, the harsh reality without the safety net I had woven for decades. The pain in my heart was immense, but the determination for her to learn the lesson was greater. In that cheap motel, alone and abandoned by David, Sarah finally began to understand the void she had created in her own life by pushing me away. 2 weeks had passed since Christmas, and the silence in my apartment was almost palpable. I, Mia, at 68, felt the weight of my decision, but I didn't regret it. News about Sarah reached me through Lucas, my nephew, who, despite not entirely agreeing with my actions, remained loyal. He told me about the eviction, about David's abandonment, and about Sarah's despair. Aunt Mia, she's in a very difficult situation. She's sleeping in shelters, trying to find temporary jobs. She's truly remorseful. Despite everything, my mother's heart still ached. I didn't want to see her suffer, but I needed her to understand the value of what she had scorned. One afternoon, I received a letter. It wasn't an email nor a text message, but a handwritten letter, delivered by mail. The handwriting was Sarah's. I opened it with trembling hands. In the letter, Sarah didn't ask for money, nor a place to stay. She asked for forgiveness. Mom, I understand. I understand what I did. I understand the value of your love, your sacrifice. I was blind, selfish, ungrateful. David never loved me like you did. He loved what you gave me. I traded unconditional love for the illusion of status. I publicly humiliated you, and you gave me the hardest lesson of my life. I deserved it. But please, Mom, give me a chance to prove I've learned. I don't want your money. I don't want your apartment. I just want my mom back. Tears streamed down my face. They weren't tears of pain, but of immense relief. She had understood. The lesson, however cruel it had been, had taken effect. That night, I called Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, I need your help again. I want to reverse some of my decisions. He, with his usual calm, simply said, I'll be there tomorrow morning, Mrs. Mia, at 8 sharp. The next day, Sarah received a notification. It wasn't an eviction, but a newly opened bank account in her name, with a modest amount, enough for rent and some basic expenses. Attached was a note. A mother's love is priceless, but dignity is. Use this to rebuild your life, not to hide from it. With love, Mom. At that moment, Sarah knew that, although the wounds were deep, the path to redemption had been opened. The following months were a period of rebuilding. Sarah, 35, accepted the help, but with a humility I had never seen in her. She rented a small apartment in a modest Los Angeles neighborhood and began looking for work, no longer in large corporations, but in small landscape architecture firms where she could truly get hands-on and learn the value of labor. She called me regularly, not to ask for anything, but to tell me about her achievements, however small. Mom, I got a project for a community garden. It's not much, but I'm so proud. I, Mia, at 68, watched from afar, feeling a silent pride. The investment fund was reactivated, but with the condition that Sarah would only have access to it after a 2-year period of proven financial independence. The life insurance I kept with Billy and the charity, but added Sarah as a beneficiary of a smaller portion. As a reminder that maternal love, though unconditional, also has limits and expectations. Our relationship didn't go back to how it was before, and perhaps it never would. The wound of humiliation was still there, but now it was healing, and in its place grew a mutual understanding and respect that hadn't existed before. Sarah had learned the value of sacrifice, gratitude, and dignity. She had understood that a mother's love is not an inexhaustible source of resources, but a treasure to be cherished. A year after that fateful Christmas Eve dinner, I received an invitation. It was from Sarah. Mom, I'd like you to come spend Christmas with me and Billy. We won't have roasted turkey or porcelain dishes, but we'll have love and respect. And you'll have the seat of honor at the table. Tears streamed down my face. This time, they were tears of pure joy. That Christmas, in her small apartment, Sarah hugged me tightly. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for teaching me the most important lesson of my life. I hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her love. Sometimes, The most painful lessons are the ones that transform us. And, in the end, true love always finds a path to redemption. And have you ever experienced a situation where pain turned into a valuable lesson? Share your story in the comments, like this video if it touched you, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional narratives.